welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello everyone and welcome to Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast on the We Made This Podcast Network. My name is Kurt North, and we are here to discuss the second episode of Season 2, Better Than Life. Joining me today is my co-host, Mark Adams. Mark, how are you doing, mate?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm not too bad. We've been not dissing social distancing, but talking social distancing, mask wearing, and all kinds of things.
Whining about it.
Whining about it, I think that's the word, yes. And how it's affecting the wedding business and the like, and being myself being in a band, you being a celebrant, and all kinds of things. So it's, where we will be when this airs, in, I would say, around October time. We'll listen fondly back to this and think, what were we thinking? Everything is back to normal, won't we?
Well, sometimes it's good to have a jolly old whinge, and sometimes it's good to be optimistic. So let's hope that the whinge has done us some good today, and the optimism is something that we should have had.
Yes. And I'll just drive down to Manchester, we'll go to a pub and I'll have a few drinks and we'll take it from there.
Do you know what? I'd like that.
Yeah, it'd be all right, won't it?
Right.
And also joining me is Carl Bryan. How are you doing, Carl?
I'm not too bad at all.
Good. What would you be? What would your Better Than Life episode be if you were playing Better Than Life? What would it be?
Oh, it would probably be. I'd be much.
I'm not asking Mark this, by the way, because God knows what'll happen.
I'd probably be I'd probably be thinner, just a lot thinner. I'd probably be happy with that. No, I'd probably be a very bustling metropolis. I'm very at home in sort of cities. I really enjoy being in New York when I was in New York and places like that. I'd probably travel a lot and use it as an opportunity to do that, which is, I mean, I could do that in real life, but I'd probably do it where I could just teleport from one country to another.
So you wouldn't go to Rill then?
I don't know. I've never seen Rill. It could be nicer than it looks on the telly.
I'll put it this way: I went 3 years on the bounce to Rill, and what you see is basically what you get. To be fair, no, I quite enjoyed it. I was on a Haven holiday camp. There was like a single parent like network of people, and my mum used to take me and my brother went to Rill 3 times over the 3 years. You know, perfectly decent holidays, great memories of it. I remember going to see a Radio 1 roadshow there as well. It happened to be there one of the years I was there.
Showing your age, Kurt.
I think, I know. And Danny Minogue, I think, if memory serves me right, actually kissed me on the cheek because I was at the front.
My goodness.
So I did all right there.
Got closer to a Minogue than the rest of us have.
Yeah, exactly. That's if my memory serves me right. I've got a feeling that happened, unless I dreamt it, unless it was my Better Than Life.
Maybe.
Mark, okay, I will ask you, what do you class as your total immersion video game Better Than Life? Where would that take you?
I think I'd probably have the same friends and the same hobbies, but like infinite money. That's really fucking shallow, isn't it?
Yes, I like it.
I wouldn't cook. I'd have a chef, and he'd make me like all of the cuisine of all of the world. And I think, like Carl, I'd just go out and be really fucking decadent and just see the world with no money worries. I think really the only thing that I think I need for Better Than Life is infinite money, and that says a lot about me.
I'll click on that mod. Infinite money.
Champagne socialist with capitalist values. Yeah, that's about right.
I think it'd be quite funny because the sort of almost Rimmer brain part of me, if I knew I was in the game and I knew I was in the game, but I had infinite money, I'd be like, how quickly is this going to go off the rails? Yeah. When I can do anything I want, how much is my own brain going to mess this up?
I think very quickly. I think in my eyes, I need to have the constraints in my life, otherwise things will go very, very wry.
How about you, Kurt? You have to answer the question too.
Oh man, at the moment, I'd just like some normality back in my life. I'd like to be able to just do the things that I want to do. I'd like to, like, I always enjoy a good social session outside of work. Having a few drinks and stuff. So just to be able to do that at the moment. But having said that, I think I'd like to just enjoy life, but have this sounds really bad, but going maybe traveling around the world, but not necessarily having all the bloody things that go wrong with me when I'm actually abroad, like getting hives and kind of all kinds of things and getting travel sickness.
Perfect health sounds better than life.
Yeah, perfect health. Yeah, I am a healthy person. I just more than 10 days in any destination seems to do my immune system absolutely no good whatsoever. So yeah, something like that would be great. But being able to go to gigs day in, day out, maybe being able to choose what I want to do, and just enjoy myself and have a good time.
I think everybody, if given sort of like you can do anything you want with yourself, what would you do? People's first thing would, can you fix that tweak in my knee? Can you fix that click in my ankle? That'd be great.
I want my teeth sorting out. Instead of metal fillings, sort me out with the nice white ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Almost those games where you've got to choose a destination. You just be able to like go, can I go back to that choice and make the different one, please?
Yeah. This is a massive, massive rabbit hole. We could sit here for hours and whine about our lives when we're actually, we're all kind of all right, really.
It's a good job we don't drink doing these shows, otherwise it'd get very depressing very quickly.
Well, that's for series 12 or 13, Carl. We'll get that sorted.
No, series 8.
Series 8. Oh, yeah, season 8. Series 8, when they actually do get drunk on hooch. That'll be great. We'll do it then. Anyway, guess what, guys?
What?
Don't know, guess. Go on, have a guess. No clues, just have a guess.
Very clever.
Yes, we're going to be talking about second episode, Better Than Life. It was aired on the 13th of September, 1988, and it was written by Rob Grant and Doug Naylor and directed by Ed Bye. This episode introduces the total immersion video game, Better Than Life. Now, it's been a long, long, long time since I read the books, but do you remember reading the books? Have you read the books recently? Because I do remember this was a big part of the novels.
I actually re-downloaded the audiobooks this morning to give them another go over, because I used to I had them on tape, and I used to listen to them a lot. Yes, the first two are read by Chris Barry, the third one's Craig Charles, and the fourth one's Rob Grant. But the first two are brilliant, and I say they're probably the two books I read the most for a long time, because they're brilliant. It's interesting as well in how the game in this is quite, it's a fun thing, whereas in the books it's very dangerous. The
books are so much deeper about Better Than Life, and I'll be honest, having read the books, going back to this episode, it almost weakens the episode, because the books do it so well, and it's really, really sinister in the books, much more so than it is here, even though it does get quite sinister, I think. And there's like huge parts of the book that aren't covered at all in this. Like, for example, Rimmer doing the body swapping, where he starts by getting a bigger and bigger penis, and then eventually ends up in like hobo bodies and stuff like that. I really, really, really liked the book, actually.
The book would have made a good film almost. If they did another special, it would have been interesting to have done Better Than Life, and it would have almost been like a horror almost in ways, with things like Crichton would be burning into Lister's arm to tell him he's dying, and things like that. And again, the things that happen to Rimmer in there. It's a high drama book. actually.
I definitely think we should look at the books at some point for one of our specials.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it was something that I remember reading the books when I was younger, a lot younger, and thoroughly enjoying them. And actually, it was one of my first real kind of novel reading, kind of deep dives into stuff that I was really invested into. And it literally has been so long since I've read that book. And I haven't got it. I need to get it, and I need to get maybe the audiobooks as well, because it has been so long. And I do remember it permeates over both books, doesn't it? It kind of like it's a hangover on both books that it does. So it is interesting. It is interesting how there's the various different aspects that may touch upon in later seasons with different versions of it, and this playing of virtual reality and immersion gaming. Gunman of the Apocalypse is Mark. Obviously, it's something that we can look at in the future as well. But the books are definitely something that we need to look at.
I remember with the books that up until this point, if I'd read, I don't know, let's say I read Jurassic Park, it felt like the film of Jurassic Park was just a watered down version of the book. Whereas this, it felt like it was almost like they'd taken the small idea that they had for a TV show, and it went the opposite way round. They kind of elaborated on that in a way that they couldn't have done in the original. Do we know whether the books were written first or written after the scripts? Because in my head, it feels like they could never have done this in the TV show.
I think they were written about the same time. I'm just having a quick look now. The first book was 1989, so that was about series 3. So yeah, it would have been after the scripts, and then Better Than Life was, let's have a look, 1991.
Yeah, so it was written after. Yeah, so like I say, they had this idea for the TV show, and then they took it and made the book better. Whereas normally, if you have a kind of book of the film, it's really fucking shallow, and it's just the plot written down. And that's not what they did with these books.
Yeah.
No, I mean, if you look at it, sort of the third book, Last Human, it almost works as an ending for the whole thing. It's in what happens at the end. It almost, you could almost go, if you were going to end Red Dwarf, that'd be a fantastic point to end it on.
Yeah, I think he said that, hasn't he? I think he said that if Red Dwarf was to ever to end, that they would end it like something like Last Human was. Whereas up until now, every single ending of Red Dwarf, including the Dave stuff has been, especially the end of season 12, which again, I'll rephrase that I kept forgetting existed, that it kind of ends in a way that's very nostalgic. It kind of looks back at the series as a whole, and you can take it as an ending, but it's still open. Whereas the other endings have been like cliffhanger endings. They've all been like, oh, how are they going to get out of that? Or is that really the case? It's that kind of thing. Where I think that the way I think that they've both said that it would be probably done through a novel rather than anything else, and end it that way rather than seeing it on screen.
Yeah. And obviously there's bigger scope for, if you look at the books, the world is so much bigger because they don't have to take into account how are we going to put this on screen.
Yeah.
Especially in the third and fourth one. In the fourth one, they're at Niagara Falls at one point and things like that. So it'd be interesting to see if they did another novel to wrap everything up. I personally think that they'll probably do it when that happens. If they do decide, right, we'd need to end it. It'd be nice if they did actually. I do enjoy when a series managed to tie everything up. It'd probably be another film special like Promised Land, I think. But, the thing I like, and the first time I ever really realised this was when I watched the end of Angel, in that it had an ending, but like you said, it was left open in that, they possibly are going to live to fight another day. We're just leaving them at this point for now, almost.
Yeah.
It's, And I think that's what, they kind of put themselves in a bit of a spot with the end of Series 8. And obviously that becomes but like you said, when it gets to the Dave era, it's written like any series that wrapped up could be the last or could keep going, because not to get maudlin about it, everyone's getting on a bit here.
Mm.
And yeah, including the writers as well. So it's like, there's only so much that they'll be able to do, and I think that the popularity of Dave is really interesting. That's something for another day. So I think we should maybe let's talk a bit deeper about the episode that we're going to talk about.
Oh yeah, good point.
It's quite fun that we're talking about all this and we're still only in season 2. There's a long way to go, and it's going to be really good fun.
So let's talk about Holly's opening line, because I think, Mark, you've mentioned this before. This is we're over 60 billion miles away from the nearest Bernie Inn, which does date it, doesn't it? There's not been much of this, but recently, and in this one, we've got things like the Marilyn Monroe thing, which is great. That's a classic thing. But you've got the Peter Beardsley comment. So there's a bit of dating in this episode.
I have to admit, I don't know what a Bernie Inn is.
No, neither do I.
Neither do I. I'm assuming it's just a small chain of like B&Bs or something, maybe.
Is it a southern thing?
Don't know.
I thought it was a sort of like pub chain, like a Harvester or something like that.
The fact that we don't know.
Yeah.
It's a steakhouse established in 1950. A chain of British steakhouses established in 1955. It was established by brothers Frank and Aldo Burney, who modelled the chain on restaurants they'd seen in America. The restaurants introduced the post-war British public to a homegrown restaurant chain, which came with its own pre-style restaurants. So kind of like a Wetherspoons, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing.
Yeah, Wetherspoons, but without a cunt as the CEO.
Yeah. I tried to stay away from politics, and I mentioned Wetherspoons. I was like, oh, crap.
That might be the first and last C-bomb on this podcast, and no regrets.
I was trying to think of the chain. Oh, Brewster. I think Brewster's a chain, isn't it? So stuff like that, I think. So that opens up. So it's just saying, right. So the fact that it says loneliness weighs heavy on us all. Personally, the only thing that keeps me going is the thought that we are over 6 billion miles from the nearest Wetherspoons. That would be the joke now, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
really?
And it would be a better joke too.
Yeah, you've heard it here first, folks. So this is something that I wanted to mention in this episode as well, because we've briefly discussed it on previous episodes. The fact that he's talking about this loneliness weighs heavy on us all, and he mentions about the fact that we've got a godless society last episode, and there's the TV news is on here, talks about the Bible and stuff like that as well. I mean, there's a few mentions of it throughout the past 2 episodes, isn't there?
I really enjoyed the joke about the missing page from the Bible. Yeah, that joke about the "To My Darling Candy," they really, really comes across that they are not religious people.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I at the time I was 14, 15, and I think I probably was anti-religious, and it really kind of hit the right notes for me. But as I've got older, I'm definitely not anti-religious. I'm still completely atheist, humanist, whatever you want to call me. And I don't find vicious anti-religion very tasteful anymore, because it's not helpful. And I think coming at it in my kind of slightly more chilled out 40s, as opposed to my religion-hating teens, I found the joke a little bit... It just seemed like there was no reason to be quite so savage.
Yeah, I think with the delivery, I don't know if it was because Norman Lovett was doing the delivery of the "We Live in a Godless World," but it almost sort of flipped under my radar slightly. Maybe it's just because I've never been particularly religious at all. It just kind of passed me by. I don't know whether that would have been the case at the time, because this would have been prime White House sort of era, wouldn't it, as well?
Yeah, I mean, the only reason why I kind of refer back to it is because we've been researching for both the first 2 episodes of season 2, because obviously it's split up by an episode, so by connecting the two. If we'd recorded this episode like months after we recorded episode 1, I probably wouldn't have made the connection.
Yeah.
But because we're researching both these episodes at the same time, because we're recording very close to each other, that it's just like it talks about the godless society there, then it talks about loneliness here, and then we get that Bible thing. So it's like it's littered through, and obviously things like the cat stuff in season 1. So it's just littered through it. It's sprinkled through it. It's not really like, heavy hitting, but it's. I mean, obviously the news article is an interesting one. There's a double meaning of that though, with the fact of using fiction as well. The fact, it says any characters are purely fictitious and don't belong here, etc., etc. So there's a bit of a double.
I just thought he was a bit mean. And I tend to leave religious folk alone these days, whereas 10 or 15 years ago, I might troll them on the internet, So with my change of attitude, stuff like that perhaps hits a nerve, because I feel like I did used to be quite hostile towards people of faith, and I'm really not like that anymore, Yeah,
I mean, I as much as I'm like an atheist, I'd be more agnostic in the fact that I don't really have, not an opinion, but don't really express that opinion in normal day life anyway. It doesn't come up in my world. I've had people who are religious. I've had people who I know have faith and whatever, but we don't really talk about it. So it's not something that I've really actively gone out there. But it's just interesting how in this sci-fi world that we do that they bring that in.
I mean, part of me wonders whether it's because it was in the sort of alternative comedy era of the 80s, the right on sort of era, whether it was Grant and Naylor being young and angry and wanting to make a point, if you get what I mean. In the same, it was kind of like, I think there's the Doctor Who episode where Tennant meets Davidson, and he talks about how when in the early days I was young and angry as you are. Maybe that was the kind of thing with Grant and Naylor, that they were both sort of like, right, let's really stick it to them. And maybe even now they look back on it and be like, there was no need for that, really.
Yeah, they could well do. But anyway, so going back to the episode and the opening scene that we get, we see that Lister isn't exactly well at this moment in time. What I wanted to talk about with here is that there's a couple of lines that are picked out on here, which is where Rimmer's trying to better himself, and Rimmer throughout the course of this episode, we discussed it a little bit last episode, is that he's trying to the character himself is trying to develop, but also we're getting this backstory as well. So the fact that he is trying his best. He's trying to step out of his comfort zone to make this food for them, and trying to rehabilitate himself is a really interesting character dynamic. And
in a really kind of shallow Mark likes visual gags way, the H sign on the chef's hat made me laugh.
Yeah.
It kind of goes in as well with what becomes the theme of him during a lot of the series is, if he didn't have the weight, the enormous drag of his family, Rimmer could better himself so much more. But that whole the neuroses and the drag of that upbringing he's had, because he's trying to better himself here and trying to move forward and trying to deal with his death in the way that. But then as soon as he gets the news from his family, even though it's 3 million years past the point, and it's almost a moot point, and he knows it anyway, it completely stops him. He doesn't carry on. He goes immediately into a funk and he just starts watching TV. I thought that was quite interesting. Just sort of, it's the first time I think we really go for the weight of how much his family bothers him.
Mark, what were you going to say there?
I've already said it about the H on the hat.
No, that was it.
Yeah.
I thought he would have given something really deep and meaningful. No. Oh, okay, that's fine.
I do think that the speech Lister has about dumplings was probably written because those are very good words to say in a Liverpudlian accent. Dumplings and bounce. And it was just a really nice sort of just just the way he says it, I think, is really good.
Dumplings is a satisfying word, regardless of your accent.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, it is interesting though, the fact that it's that Cat's like sleeping off on the stomach pump, and Rimmer's just like, he'll be all right, he'll be fine. The lamb was a bit of a flop, but the I do like the athlete's foot thing, saying it looked like cheese, and it was all kind of thing. But what I really picked out on it as well is that Lister going, you've got the scutters to help. We are trying to rehabilitate you. You've got the scutters. And I know that we particularly have mentioned this in the past about Pinky and Smegging Perky, which is brought up here, and obviously the Western kind of aspects of the scutters as well. But there's an element of this and truth in this for me when Rimmer says, but they don't, do they? They keep an eye on that lamb, and they sit there for 3 hours and watch it burn. And the reason why that comes up from a personal point of view for me is that that's the kind of thing I do when I'm drunk. So not necessarily like that potential sentence, but the idea behind it. There was one time where I was in a house party. This was when I was very young. We were drinking. It was all really, really, really good drinking session. And somebody had told me something, and they said, "Oh no, don't tell that person. Don't tell that person. Don't tell them till tomorrow." So my drunk self decided I was going to tell them at midnight when it became tomorrow, because my brain told me, well, it's tomorrow, isn't it? so there's this thing of like, just, literally when I'm drunk, I take things at face value as like, go home. I'll probably just like literally just automatically just walk home or say the truth or say it as it's meant. And it's really interesting that the scutters have got like, they'll just look at a lamb and just watch it burn, which ironically, if anyone's been to a fire training situation, that you actually get a video on some training courses of people in a newsagents where the paper rack is on fire and people just watch it burn. And it's really interesting from human condition.
Yeah, I liked it because there's the sort of exchange that Lister says, "Oh, you blame everything on being dead," but Rimmer's got a point in that what he's got to help him isn't effective.
It's definitely not effective, and that's what's so funny about the Scutters is from very early on, the writers encountered these naff models, and regardless of whether or not they were supposed to be good in the first place, they clearly weren't, and they play on that now. The Scutters are explicitly incompetent, and that makes for so many laughs.
That made me think, actually, what would have been more effective? If Crichton was still there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe that was the thing. Maybe, Rimmer was giving Crichton lists of jobs and he'd initially gone a bit mad with power, but he could have eventually realised, hang on a minute, this is going to be my arms and my legs and things like that for when I actually want to do things. Yeah, but yeah.
That's a good point, that, actually, because, he isn't, he would have had someone literally serving him all day and was efficient at it, whereas he hasn't anymore. That's interesting on the back of last episode. Yeah, definitely.
I hadn't thought about it, but you're absolutely right. If he had got Crichton, he wouldn't have these problems. But we wouldn't have the Scutter gags, so I'm kind of glad Crichton's not there yet.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, we'll give him a season. He's fine. He's off to his field. He's all right. It's up to his living his dream. Next scene is Holly on the screen. What's happening, dudes? And the fact that guess what kind of thing, which is what I alluded to earlier on before. And it's another classic Holly setup, isn't it?
Holly's wonderful, and I think rewatching this, I loved Holly anyway, but he's just brilliant. Norman Lovett is a genius.
It's great. I know that it's not revealed in these earlier series, but it's this whole thing of he considers his job is to keep Lister sane, and almost in these conversations he has, where he's just dragging out conversations and making Lister and Rimmer guess. It's like, well, that could keep them sane, I suppose, because if it was just a kitten straight, guess what? What this? It'd just be. Yeah, making sure Lister still has that dose of he still gets angry, he still gets irritated, he still gets this, so he's still running the emotional gamut, and even though they're stuck in deep space, there's not a great deal to do.
Yeah. I think that it's both Lister and Rimmer as well. The fact, because you can't always have Rimmer and Lister at each other, and the fact you've got Holly with them both on the same side at that point, because obviously they're going, well, what? And he's literally just playing with him is a really nice touch, and the fact that they're on that side is nice as well, because you don't often get that in the gags. So the fact that that they're both being inflicted on that, I think, is interesting.
It's that thing of like it's like, well, I can call my brother a prat, but you can't call my brother a prat. Almost that sort of thing. And they're on the same. There's a lot more warmth to them, I think, in this series. For them from the first one, definitely. Just especially because I think the bunk scenes are a bit more. I remember more bunk scenes in this one than the first one, and they seem to be a lot warmer between them. They're having more conversations, like they've accepted that this is it. They're in a ship for the immediate future, and so they may as well attempt to get along.
Well, it's a natural progression as well, because do we know how much of a time has elapsed between the end of season 1 and beginning of season 2?
They do say in a later episode it's about 2 or 3 years.
Right. Okay. So so there's naturally been time for them to get into this swing of things and stuff. Then,
I like the fact that it's not like the next week as well. I think it kind of allows for the relationship to have become what it is, and also it also highlights the weight between the two series, and it highlights the fact that they will just be out there for years when nothing happens.
Yeah, it gives it almost a timeless quality in that we can pop in at any point because they're not going anywhere. And like you said, nothing's really going on, so we can pop in at any point, and things there'll be a certain degree to it that's still the same as the last time we popped in.
It's having, as I say, the same kind of cohesion of character, but just moving them on slightly, and it's only slightly. It's not a massive change. So you're still at home with seeing them, but it's just it'd be almost like not necessarily nostalgic, because we don't know how many people have actually seen season 1. Between season 1 and season 2, so they had to re-emphasize that a little bit more as well, and maybe there was some production notes on top of that as well, and there's a lot of aspects that can come with it, but I think that it feels like it's a natural progression, and I think that's the reason why it works so much. The one thing I wanted to pick up on as well, which is a typical sci-fi trope, is this idea of sequels. So we get in Back to the Future with the Jaws franchise, and we get it here with Friday the 13th part, 6,000 and whatever it was. Casablanca being remade, and as I said, starring Peter Beardsley, which kind of dates it.
And Myra Binglebat.
Myra Dinglebat, yeah. All the space bars in all the world you had to re-materialize in mine. I think was brilliant.
I mean, I got the Peter Beardsley joke. I laughed at the Peter Beardsley joke. But is Peter Beardsley really remembered that much to...
He was born in my city, Peter Beardsley. He was born in Carlisle.
Surely there were contemporaries of Peter Beardsley that were more famous. I don't know, Alan Shearer?
He wouldn't have been... Peter Beardsley at the time, I mean, one of the things about Peter Beardsley, I think that's what makes it funnier, and I'm not a big football fan, but I do know this about Peter Beardsley, is he wasn't a particularly dashing chap.
No. And I think that's probably why I know him too, because he were ugly, and that was funny apparently.
Yeah, and he had the traditional bowl cut, and he talked quite funny as well. He from what I remember, he sort of talked like he had a mouthful of peanut butter.
He used to say a lot, and as I say, he was originally born in my city, so just watch what you're saying.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I'm a bit more coherent. But he did used to go and was renowned for that.
And that's where the gags come from. But unfortunately, it is it's not a timeless gag.
No, I think the sort of half-life on it has worn off now, but it did last for quite a while, I think. because he was on telly. I think he actually went into punditry, oddly enough, and things like that. So because he was around for quite a while. I don't think I only know this because I used to play a lot of Premier Manager 98, and he was there. I don't like football for some reason. I really love Premier Manager 98, just the organisational thing of it. And he was in that, and so he was still active in 1998. So that would have been past Series 6. So yeah, the joke would have lasted to at least the turn of the millennium. But now, it's faded a bit.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I've just quickly looked up, and he started his professional career in Carlisle, but he was born just outside of Carlisle, about half an hour away. But so make fun of all you like. But another name, Brooke Shields, comes up. I know we mentioned this, but that was another kind of name that gets brought up. Like, it's Brooke Shields' buttocks, which was another thing. But they kind of start to face up to this idea of the immersion game stuff. Before that kind of really kicks in with the whole scientific nature of it, with like the electrodes and frontal lobes, hypothalamus, and all those words that are used, which are quite interesting in itself, is that within this male pod we also get the chess game with Gordon.
Oh, all right.
So, Mark, what do you make of Gordon?
When that actor, if they saw, I don't know if he auditioned for it, but as soon as they saw his face and that voice, they must have gone, we have got to find something to do for this bloke.
I don't think he's famous, is he? I don't recognise him from anywhere else.
I had a look. He didn't do it. He's one of those guys who sort of turns up in the odd episode of something. But from what I can see here, he was in the original Survivors in the 70s. So he seemed to be doing a lot more when he was younger. But he didn't do a great deal going into... Again, I've not seen anything else he's in. But this looked like it was one of those things where you kind of go, ooh, almost like a call out to fans of Survivor, in the same way you might get a cameo these days of somebody from, say, like Jenny Agutter turns up in Series 6, and you go, oh, Jenny Agutter. I can imagine for some people back in the day when they saw him, it was like, oh, it's so-and-so from Survivors. But any time sort of after that point, you go, no idea who that is. It's just a funny voice and a great moustache.
Well, that's exactly what it was. That's exactly why he was there, and it worked, and it was funny. It was a nice gag, and I think it was the kind of gag that they wrote because they got Norman Lovett.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think they changed that actor as well in some of the recordings. If memory serves me right, on the YouTube quarantine of Red Dwarf, and I think it was maybe in, I might be misremembering this, maybe in the Body Snatcher collection, that they changed Gordon.
No.
So, but I can't remember why. So the fact that they've done that, I mean, I would have to research that in a bit more detail, but I'm pretty sure that that's what they said. So I'll definitely go to the YouTube quarantine, Red Dwarf quarantine, where likes of Ed Bye are talking about that, because they do say that at one point that character was changed, which is a shame.
Well, I think Gordon's important because it highlights that not all of the ships have a Holly, and so this gives us this kind of leads on to Queeg, and leads on to the female Holly, and leads on to potentially meeting other ships' computers, where I think it's here where we learn that they don't all look like Holly, you know?
Mm. I like the fact that he's supposed to be more intelligent than Holly.
But Holly's like sort of really like he's set back, isn't he? He's almost like enamored by him, which I think is brilliant. I think again that works really well because he's even more like deadpan than Holly is. But like Holly's going, oh, he's some guy. He's got an IQ of 8,000, or and it's just that whole thing is of like Holly being enamored with him, and yet. They're just playing this chess game, which is the first move.
They've always done well when it's time to cast another computer at finding someone with an outstanding voice, be it Gordon or when it's Charles Organs for Queeg. It's someone who really sticks out with the voice and obviously the face, but not taking it's not a Norman Lovett sort of imitation. And you get that, as we talked about it in the last episode, going up to, in the later series, we meet another computer, and she's different from that as well, but she's still got a very striking face and a voice as well. So yeah, it's always, their casting's always been pretty spot on for a lot of these things.
Obviously, the immersion game gets mentioned here, and later on, which we'll touch upon shortly, I just want to talk a little bit more about the mail arriving. But the later on that we get the aspects of what that immersion video game means to Rimmer, and the fact that he's so far down that he's not happy with life, and I think we've all been in that position. The fact that he sees the game as an escape as well is really interesting. And let's just jump on that now, actually, because Rimmer, Lister is trying his best to say, "Come on, Rimmer, come and just join the game. It's fine." But it takes the news article for him to almost like that space of being on his own and hearing about the actual Better Than Life game, because they don't know about Better Than Life at this point, because Lister's more interested in like the zero G kickboxing, football, whatever it may be. And it's Rimmer that sees it's Better Than Life, and he's the one that goes, "Oh, right, I'm going. If this anything's better than what I'm feeling now." And it's interesting that it's Rimmer that brings that to them.
I think it's fascinating that this predicts something that happened not actually that much not longer afterwards. Do you remember the game Second Life?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so this is basically predicting not quite the technology level, but it's predicting Second Life, and people would spend more time on Second Life than they would in their real life, and were genuinely as addicted as people were, certainly in the book version of Better Than Life, but also in that's implied in this as well, that it's a painfully addictive game because, well, it's better than life.
Well, this is ironic. This is how long my Twitter handles are Moldrake, which for those people who don't know, it's based on an X-File episode in season 3 where Fox Mulder is fictionalizing a book, and they call him Reynard Moldrake. Reynard being a fox, and Moldrake just a play on the word. I think I'm not 100% sure on that. And my Second Life name was Moldrake Noel. But I didn't spend that much time on Second Life. I did go to bar. I went to a couple of bars in there, rock bars and whatever, and spent maybe a couple of hours there. But I didn't get to the point where it was literally all the time. Did any of you actually spend any time in there then?
No, but I do know somebody in Second Life. I think it's Second Life. I'm pretty sure it is. Who ran a gentleman's club,
right?
In Second Life, and made money from it, and made a good amount of money from it.
Yeah, people did make a lot of money from Second Life, if I remember rightly, didn't they? Like selling real estate and stuff.
Yeah, she ran the club, and she talked to, she had her girls that were dancers and did other stuff who were real people, obviously on the phone somewhere, and they ran it as a business. And she, between them, they made a tasty bit of money on it. I don't know whether they're still doing it. I don't think they are. But when she told me, I was taken aback initially, because I didn't think you could make money off a game like that. It's obviously now in the age of Twitch streamers and stuff like that. It's getting to the point where you can now spend a lot of time in a virtual world and make cash off it as if you were in a real world. Yeah,
I remember I think it was simoleons. It was called the money, and there was things like retailers on the streets. So you go around the actual Second Life areas and jump on the map, and you'd be able to buy tickets for a concert, and you'd be able to do this. And you think about Second Life then compared to what it could be now, and especially in the pandemic that we're in, that effectively that's almost where we are now. But Second Life was so far ahead of the curve that it was able to do that then, and just think how much that has changed. It's just incredible to think.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a reason why Grand Theft Auto and Grand Theft Auto Online have been one of the best-selling games for the past 10 years, nearly.
Yeah.
And it's still more people. They put it out for free on a new platform recently, and hundreds of thousands of people signed up to it still because it was going for free. Because you can go into this virtual world, forget who you are for a few hours, and but there's people. So obviously we'll get back to the episode in a second. But there's people online who are role playing in GTA Online as things like police. With all the modders and stuff, you get people of police. There was an article I was reading the other day about a woman who I think she runs a shop in this modded GTA server, but she's a serial killer. She picks people up and then takes them out into the desert and kills them. But they're so into it. They're role playing the whole way through, and it's bizarre. I play GT Online, but I don't get into it to that level. Definitely not. But
yeah, I mean, I've gone to the point where when it first originally went online, that you would have things like I would be the getaway driver, and literally, and this was before any of the online missions were there. It was kind of like just online just happened, and there'll be like a task where you have to go and get the jet from the airport, and I started hanging around, and these people going, "What's this guy doing on top of this on top of that grass? No, we're going to get him." And eventually, I got in with that group, and I flew them in, dropped them out, and then flew away, and the police chased after me and stuff. So yeah, there's been elements of that, but not as deep as that. I mean, that is, I don't have the time to do that. I need to talk about Red Dwarf. I can't
exactly.
And everything else. I need to talk about Star Trek and X-Files and Millennium and everything else. But
I just feel like it was worth mentioning because they say The Simpsons predicts the future, and this exactly predicted the future of video games.
Yeah, I don't. If this came about just from watching it, and it still makes me shudder watching it to this day. If they went, "You've got to stick 2 giant needles in the front of your head," it was like, "Nah, I'm good." It's like I'm all right. I mean, obviously it's a prop, but the way they do it is like I'm guessing it's like the stage knife thing of you push it and the blade goes into the ball rather than into their heads. But it still looks real enough for me to go, ugh.
To be fair, it's a pair of bike helmets. I'm not sure that it's a very good prop.
Yeah, it's not. Oh no! I mean, is it Star Wars? Not Star Wars. Star Wars. It was one of the prequels where his communicator's a lady shave. So just painted a different colour, but it's not a good prop. But I think it's just because I don't like needles. Just seeing them push it willingly into their own heads. It just sends a shiver down my spine.
Deliberate. It's science. Yeah. It's heavy sci-fi body horror, and that's good. That's great stuff. I think that's brilliant.
Well, it makes sense because you've got to put the electrodes into your brain, but it's it is, and it goes in as well with what we're talking about in the novels that it causes you physical damage. I can imagine prolonged periods of time with that stuck in your head can certainly cause damage to your brain over a long period of time. Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, there's a reason why workplaces provide you with free eye tests if you're staring at a screen all day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These things will damage your body.
I mean, obviously, moving on a step from that, if depending on how this pandemic goes, I mean, it's going to be here for a long time, and you don't know what's going to come out of the other end, and what extra things we're going to have to do moving into the future, and learning from what we've learned so far. So there may well be things actually on top of what we're doing already. And as you say, free eye tests, it may come with some sort of testing kit afterwards and stuff. It's all a bit strange. But if we jump back a little bit, because we talked a little bit about the game there, but we need to talk about some of the setup, because the setup includes the Outland revenue, which is a great, typical Red Dwarf kind of thing to do, that you build something up and then there's a twist at the end, which is obviously which yours. And then you've also got the letter from the mother. So the setup is fairly straightforward about the Outland revenue, and we know what's going to happen with that by the end of the episode. But I think that the Rear Admiral letter, we talked about the getting into the depth of what the mother has done and what the family do to Rimmer, and how much it informs Rimmer's character. But the way that they deliver this is, I think, is amazing. And the fact that they use the fact that Rimmer he knows that he's dead. He knows, well, they're all dead, aren't they? That's what we get to later on. But here, it's the play on the words. It's my father is dad, and stuff like that. And Lister's realization, oh, it's an E, and all that aspect to it is really interesting. And it just well to balance between being quite sad, but also at the same time having this mistaken humour to balance the two up.
Yeah, it's almost like in the direction they turned to Chris Barry and Craig Charles and went, Craig, you're in a sitcom. Chris, you are in a drama. Because Chris Barry's performance, especially in the scene on the observation deck, he looks so haunted. It's just a brilliant performance of when he says it so quietly when he goes dead, when he realizes what Lister means.
I mean, I think it's this show is much more about empathy than I ever realized, and I feel like everybody knows what it feels like to have put your foot in it so horribly, like Lister did in this scene, and you can see that he's mortified. He doesn't even. Well, you can argue whether or not he likes Rimmer or not, but these two rag each other rotten all the time. But he realizes what he's done by mistake, and we've all been there. And you can all just imagine the kind of almost physical reaction that you would have to a fuck up like that.
Oh, yeah. I used to be known for it for a short period of time with my friends. If I ran into someone I hadn't seen in a while, guaranteed I would say something like, how's your missus? And then my mate would be next to me going, no, shut up. And it turns out they'd broken up and it was absolutely horrible.
Well, I've been on the opposite side. And sometimes it can come out of nowhere. So I think I mentioned this podcast before, but my brother, who was 5 years younger than me, died of a brain tumour. And this was 5-6 years ago now, I think it was, somewhere around there. And people hear about it, and people come to the funeral and all that kind of thing, and do what they need to do and talk to you about it and stuff. And then 6, 7 months, 8 months down the line, someone goes, how's your brother doing? It's like, and it kicks you, and it's like, right, okay, well, no, he died. And strangely enough, they're really sorry for you, but I'm more sorry for them because they're just hearing it. Because obviously people might have had their experiences with him and whatever. I've gone through that process. Yes, it hurts a little bit. I won't say that it doesn't. But when they hear it for the first time, and it's the horror of me having to go, well, actually, and it's that balance as well, and it is difficult, and I've been on both sides, but obviously, just coming from that side, it's really difficult to go, well, actually, yeah, he's dead, because that's what Rimmer's doing. He's going, he's dead, and then Lister's going, of course, is he dead? You know what I mean? No, he's dead. He's dead, and it's getting to the point where Lister then goes, oh, right, okay, and then it's almost like that reverse of like Rimmer is aware of it. It's raw for him, but he's still having that effect on Lister as well.
And I think you don't really think about it, but it's a double whammy for the person that puts their foot in it. They find out some bad news, and they feel guilty about the way they found out that bad news.
Yeah. They do talk about, I mean, some of the lines, don't get me wrong, some of the lines, like, so he passed peacefully in his Jeep is one of my favourite lines. It's just like, because we're in on the joke now. So when he's going like, Dad can't make her out, and Rimmer's going dead, and he says it minusculely, like quiet, like he said, we still aren't quite there with him. You just, if you don't catch Rimmer, you're still with Lister.
Yeah.
And it says, and then it's Rimmer going, my father is dead. Oh yeah, it's an E. And that's when you kind of like, okay, this is the funny but guilty and ambivalence that we will feel as a audience member seeing it from both sides. But then he passed away peacefully in his Jeep, and the gap again, going back to that whole waiting for the audience thing of he looks up and goes, sleep. Like, and we're all in on the joke at that point, and I really like that. But what do you make to the observation dome? Because it comes in here, and it comes in thanks to the memories. I don't think it comes back again. But I do like the idea of having this area where they can take it away from the bunk. They can get away from that, that cauldron of, the jokes and some of the ripping and stuff like that, and take an emotional piece like this and put it somewhere else. Mark, what do you make to that kind of aspect?
I think they were trying to establish that this is Rimmer's sad place, and he can always be found there when he's down, and when he's kind of hoping that someone will come and, take him under his wing. It's in both of those 2 episodes, he's there on his own, but he clearly wants someone to be with him. It's nicely done, I think.
I was thinking about this because it's a lovely little bit of set. I've got it in my head. Does it come back later on in some form? I've really got it in my head it does. Because I thought it was a really good place for, in this, especially in this bit, like it's almost like a bunk scene, but it's not a bunk scene. It's written in a way where they can have a good 2-hander, but they're not still in the quarters.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it was designed purely for get them away from, this is a meaningful conversation between the two of them, like a heart-to-heart kind of thing. And then, whereas the bunks, you can have that, but you could always be waiting for the other shoe to drop. Now, yes, we do get it with the cat in this one, but the majority of it, 3/4 of this is really deep, really emotional conversation.
It feels more
I don't think
intrusive when the cat comes into the observation area rather than when he just kind of waltzes into the bunks. It does feel more intrusive, and the cat has clearly put his foot in it here, whereas he really doesn't when he just kind of mooches in and out of the quarters. Does that make sense? Do you think?
Yeah.
That's certainly how it felt with me.
I like the fact it gets highlighted by they're having this very personal, very between them conversation, and in the background you've got the sheer isolation of deep space. Yeah, it's just the 2 of them, and then nothing for forever around them. And I think that really highlights that, because the music's really, it's that little sort of piano rendition of the background music that they use at sort of sad times in this, and I think that adds on really well. And then the fact that the music drops when the first joke really comes in, or the first sort of serious, when Rimmer says, "I hated him," even though what Lister's saying is very funny when he talks about his father, it's still very touching.
Yeah. Well, I think if we relate this to a different joke, right? So we're talking about sort of Lister saying, "I remember my dad died," and there's a build up, and he's, he goes up to the point of saying he flushed him down the bog, and he used to read magazines and stuff like that. It was still, it's a joke, but it has an emotional weight to it. Whereas the joke say, "Well, my shoe had no soul," that's a different joke. That's more like it's a joke, whereas this one has a bit of emotional resonance to it, which is the difference, I think. And obviously, apart from the chicken bit, which is different. But
with this, it's funny, but it's also true. It happened to him, whereas the shoe thing obviously is making it up. But with this, it's it happens to be I'm trying to think of the word, but the comedy tragedy side of it. A child being very traumatized about the death of his father has actually led to a circumstance which is very, very funny. And sadly, Rimmer's not got that. He's just got a letter. And I said it's the most heartbreaking line, I think, of the early series is, "I knew he was dead." Well, they're all dead, aren't they? It kind of hits you as a viewer as like, oh God, they are. Even if they get back to Earth, there's a very good chance that everyone's gone. And even then, it's sort of like, they're 3 million years away, and this ship's not going to like rocket towards it at any speed. They're probably not going to make it. You know what I mean? It's Rimmer might, but not the cat or Lister. And it's interesting. So definitely.
Yeah, I mean the cadence of the scene as well kind of goes up and down a little bit, because it starts off with these deep emotional points, and as you say, it gets "I hated him," and that's when it changes a little bit. So you get and you get more of the kind of like, let's bring it back into the Red Dwarf realm of like, well, I nearly died of malnutrition. So how did you cope with that? Because he didn't like eat. So towards the back end of this scene, and I think it's a testament to the writing of it, is that he's talking about divorcing them, and this is more. It's more like explicit in what he's had to go through, rather than having an emotional resonance. It's got more of a explicitness of, well, look, my family were awful. They put people on stretchers and did all kinds of things, and then obviously adding the twist and jokes in there works because of that. And then obviously the fact that Cat comes in and says the chicken, which I absolutely howled at this time, I must admit.
Yeah, that would be the quotable Red Dwarf for me of this episode, is whenever someone suggests food that I don't want, my immediate response was always, I prefer chicken. And I do that right. I'm a veggie these days, and I still crack that joke.
I thought, just as someone who likes little details in things, when Rimmer and Lister are talking about the dinner earlier on, Lister appears to be dressed up like they made a big effort for Rimmer's first sort of culinary excursion, and you don't see the cat. But when the cat does appear, he's still in his dinner suit. He's still in like the black and white with the dicky bow and everything like that. Because it felt like a bit more of a formal outfit for the cat than he normally would. So it's almost like he's still in that gear because he's come straight from the stomach pump, from sleeping off the stomach pump.
He does, yeah. He says, wow, my stomach has been pumped and now I'm hungry. Yeah.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. I fucking love the cat.
Just going back to, again, kind of not necessarily dating it, but touches upon it, is the next scene, Groovy Channel 27, which is what Android is on, and Rimmer mentions it in this bit as well, with the hologrammatic newsreader, which I think is actually a proper newsreader, that we get here in the news on Friday the 27th of Geldon.
Yeah. It's such a quick gag as well. She says it so quickly, they go, hang on a minute, what? And yeah, I initially was like, is that Claire Balding? Because she was a very sort of Claire Balding like newsreader, but it's not. It's somebody else altogether.
I don't know who it was actually, but yeah, the fact that it mentioned Groovy 27, that is now becoming a running theme through the episodes and stuff like that, which is in itself is interesting. And as I say, this is when Rimmer kind of is down on his luck and he wants to kind of just be left alone, and they come and get him in the find. He comes back to the immersion game, and we go through the scenes in Better Than Life to get to it. Obviously, like you said, with the bike helmets, and then through the doors. We go through, at one point, they say on the production of this, on the quarantine episode, that it's dark in one bit and it's light in the other. I don't think that had a major problem, because you're going into a game. You can start off in day and turn to night, or we can do vice versa. So I don't see that being a problem. I also, my headcanon personally, when we do get onto the real beach, is that it's taken everyone's, especially with the way it goes down the darkened path later on, that it doesn't necessarily bother me that it's on a cold, rainy, overcast beach. That you could use that in the way of like all three of them, and especially with Robin Reliant, that they don't have the imagination to make a beach in paradise kind of aspect to it.
Yeah. Robin Reliant made me smile. It's always been a car that I've always associated with happy memories, because maybe I'm showing my age, but I know a lot of people that used to have Reliant Robins, and did you know, for a Reliant Robin you don't need a driver's license, you need a motorcycle license.
Yes, I did know that, weirdly enough, because I've got
one of my dad's mates, right? He had this Reliant Robin for years and years on a provisional motorbike license because he didn't want to pay for a fucking driving test.
Brilliant.
They're just these cars. There's something so British about them. You refer to Only Fools and Horses as a perfect example. There's something so British about them and so shonky. Every time I see one, they make me just so happy.
It's because it's a collection of all their thoughts, and obviously Robin Reliant being one of them. And even in like the real, it's not like a beach in paradise. I know it's conceptually, because they wanted a beach in paradise or a sunny day, but they didn't get that, and you can't grade it at this point. But you've still got this this idea that it's coming from their thoughts and their minds, and I think from a headcanon point of view that works.
Yeah,
I think that's fair, to be honest.
Yeah, because all the cat's ever known is the ship, isn't it? It's
I mean, I know they want to go to Fujal, but could this be their Fujal, for example?
Well, it's something he's only ever seen in books, and it's he's only ever seen drawings. Something just quickly, I only noticed this when I was rewatching the episode for this. When they get on the bike and they flip off Rimmer, I swear I hear the cat say, and you might have to beat me on this, "Roll it, fucker." Right. I swear I can hear it. Oh. And it's weird. I don't know whether, because the copy I got of it was a remastered one, I don't know whether it's just something that slipped in or what, but I swear I hear it. And it's the only time I've ever heard it. I had headphones on. And and because I know sometimes there is the odd swear that comes through. There's one, I think it's episode 6 or 7, where he asks him if he can do something, and the cat says, "Does mouse shit roll?" But it's really odd hearing it for this first time. So if anyone out there's listening, and if maybe it's a remastered one, let us know on Twitter or something if you can hear it too, because hopefully I'm not going funny. And I did hear it.
It's strange. I mean, Red Dwarf is such a unique show for that, because it just, don't get me wrong, we've talked about, the X-Files changing music because of musical rights and stuff like that, but there's so many, like, remastered or redone. We talked about the McNugget yesterday, or not yesterday, last week's episode. But it seems to be messed with. I mean, almost, if not more, than Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like I say, I'm looking forward to getting the Blu-ray box set, because I've heard that 1 and 2 have been redone again, almost to correct what's been done from the Body Snatcher ones. But yeah, the one I watched apparently has been remastered, but it was just weird that this slipped in almost. I do like the green screen of the Jag in the sand, where it's a very straight line at the bottom.
There's a lot of ropey green screen in Red Dwarf Series 1 and 2, and
you've got to love it.
The time it was made, I just kind of smile to myself.
I mean, going back to that observation, Dom, there is obviously, you can see the masking coming through the hair or the shadows that land on them. That you can see the stars through the faces and through the hair and the like. But you've got, again, you give it the fact that it was of its time, and they tried to do something and it didn't quite work. But going back to that actual, just before I move on to, I want to talk about Cat next, but that the lines that they did in that dome were actually done, and they left the cut in where Craig Charles makes a couple of mistakes, and they don't actually redo it. They actually just said that was really good from a acting point of view. Yes, there's a couple of stumbles, because he stumbles just before the couple of jokes, but they do keep that in. And I thought that was interesting that they did that.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes people make mistakes, but it's a happy mistake that works for the actual show, isn't it? It's like there's a couple of bits in some of these episodes. Like I said in the previous episode with Crichton, the reaction Chris Barry's giving, you can tell he's on the verge of bursting out laughing. But he's so shaking with rage, and the nostrils are at full Rimmer, that they kept it in. And it's the rule with stuntmen as well, isn't it? If there's a take where they hurt themselves, you use that take. I think it's the same here. If it's funny, even if there's a bit of a botch in it, then they will try and use it if they can.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about the game then, and how it infects the others. So, I just wanted to talk about the cat just for the first part, because the cat's story through Better Than Life is that Marilyn Monroe is his lovey-dovey. Then he kind of gets bored of it, which seems like a very cat thing to do. and then moves on to obviously the mermaid and the wrong way around. I mean, what did you make to the cat's little story arc there? Because it is a little story. It is the fact that, it's very in character for someone like that, and obviously the joke about the fish. What did you make to that?
I think it's a kind of comment on, do we actually really know what we want? When you go into Better Than Life, you think, I want Marilyn Monroe. But then you get Marilyn Monroe, and you can't stay content with Marilyn Monroe. So you move on. I think it's a comment on, even though he's a cat, it's a comment on almost the human condition that when you get what you want, there's always something else that you want afterwards, perhaps. And credit where credit's due. There's been some ropey costumes in Red Dwarf so far, but I thought that the outfit for the fish gag was pretty good, actually.
When I saw that fish costume, my initial thought was, that poor sod probably could not see where they're going.
Oh, no.
No, just walk on sand. No, you can't see where you're going, but do it anyway. And the legs are painted, which must have been horrible.
And on a real golf course as well.
Yeah, it just because the golf course scene was a reshoot, wasn't it, of the initial beach scene where there's the footage on the DVDs of Craig Charles and Danny John Jules are shaking so much because they're so cold and it's so windy that they ended up reshooting the whole thing on the golf course.
Good grief, I didn't know that. Now you've said it, though, it makes sense.
And I think, was it the original idea to shoot it in like a centre parks sort of type place, an indoor sort of leisure centre, but they wouldn't close it.
So they went with the golf course instead.
Yeah, but I like the golf course. I like the golf course thing of Cat doesn't know how to play golf, but he's just doing it his own way. He throws the club. But
I think Craig Charles was really bigging himself up to being a golf player as well, and then he came out with that stance.
The squat.
Yeah.
Plus it ties in with the thing of the cat being more catty in these earlier ones what do you really want? And it's sex and food, basically.
To be fair, that would be heavily involved in my Better Than Life as well, and I'm not a cat.
You're very close, though, Mark. You've taken on quite a few catty attributes the longer you've had a cat.
Yeah, that's a fair cop. But, right, what's better than sex and food? They're two of my very favourite things in all the world.
And there's sleep in there as well.
Oh, man. So what about Lister then? I mean, so let's getting back to it. What Lister, his kind of sort of inclusion here isn't really that big, is it? Because obviously we're talking mainly about Rimmer, so we're getting more reactionary stuff from Lister. But what did you make to his Better Than Life experience?
I thought it was interesting because he didn't. It was almost what he imagined class to be, because he's never had it. Because growing up as like a supermarket trolley attendant, so his immediate thought is that classy is caviar and Dom Perignon, but it's still got to be mixed in with what he really wants, which is something in a pint mug and curry. So it's what he really wants with what he thinks is classy on top.
I think there's an element of showing you that Lister's kind of content, actually, in his real life. So he does still want curry. He does still want just the stuff that he knows he likes. Whereas Rimmer's all goes to pot because Rimmer isn't content in his life like Lister is.
We could always sort of, in theory, you could always have him doing the Chansky kind of thing, but they don't go there. They kind of just go with what he, as you say, the class thing, or I'm out to have a good time. It doesn't really enter his mind to think about, all right, well, I could get the girl. It's more like Better Than Life. Oh, this is going to be great. I can actually have a good time here. And he's thinking more of the party atmosphere and the, as you say, the class thing. Oh, I can get better than what I've got. So he's taking it literally rather than what Rimmer does, which is he wants to get away from his life and have a different world. He wants to have the cars. He wants to have the women. He wants to live like James Bond. And it's like, the higher you get, the harder you fall kind of thing, which is obviously what happens. So it's interesting how, Cat is kind of superfluous to the story to a degree, but he does have his own little arc with that. That Lister's very kind of straight laced, just wants to have a good time and wants to experience the things he's not used to. Where Rimmer's kind of going more from a what I could have had things been different, which is a good point to come up and talk about Rimmer. So his story is obviously the main story behind this because of everything that we've had with the letter and the fact that he's dealing with his dad's death and all of that, and the fact he's trying to get away from it. I mean, how do you think that this all comes together? Because you've got things like him being worshipped in the book. You've got again, Cat gets the best lines in this episode. He says, "No, it's mine," and he breaks the fourth wall on that. But he gets once he gets up to the very top, that's when things start to go wrong, and and what he perceives as what he should have when it shouldn't really be that way.
I thought it was interesting that when someone's calling for calling Admiral across the thing, he's very dismissive of it. It's like, oh, Admirals, how boring. And then when he realizes it's him, it's the greatest thing in the world.
There's a line in a song by Jesus Jones that is one of the most one of the most enlightening things I ever heard, and it's in a song by Jesus fucking Jones. It's the problem with success is you become what you detest, and Rimmer is the epitome of becoming what he detests, but seeing it as a good thing.
It goes to show that sort of if he managed to let go of his baggage and his neuroses, he wouldn't care about being an admiral. He'd probably be able to relax and enjoy these things, but his brain keeps telling him almost by surprise, because it takes him by surprise that he's an admiral. But his brain's done that to him, that there's this thing which is probably those neuroses going, you want to be an admiral, you want to be the greatest one ever, to stick it to your dad. And I think it gets explored more as the series goes on, is if he didn't have those things, he'd be way more chilled out and probably a lot more, able to handle things better.
As I say, I mean, the harder he falls on that, but it is an interesting tale. What about some of the little jokes that are within there? I mean, breaking the fourth wall for Cat, that's something that he starts to do in later seasons, just before we get into some of the kind of aspects of the joking aspect to it. But he does say that they start to do that a little bit, don't they, with this breaking of the fourth wall for Cat? I don't think anyone else does it bar him.
I think there's a couple of examples. I think there's a very sort of subtle one that Lister does at one point, but it might be a mistake. But in terms of a sort of out-and-out deliberate look straight at the audience, yeah, it's the Cat. But he's the most cartoonish of the characters. He's almost very Daffy Duck, Bugs Bunny-like, because he moves differently from everybody else. He can spring about and dance, and he's very slinky. He's larger than life.
But he's not a human. He's supposed to be like that. He's brilliant. I won't have a bad word said against the Cat.
I'm not saying it in a bad thing, but because he's this much bigger character, it's probably easier for him to get away with looking down the lens to the audience. Because while Lister initially is supposed to be almost like our eyes, I was thinking about this earlier, because all four of them are basically four different personality traits of a person, and the Cat is the most sort of rambunctious, outgoing sort of, hey, almost Steve Martin, wild and crazy guy type thing. And so him looking down the camera is probably the most acceptable for us as viewers to watch than, say, if Lister did it, it would be weird. If for the Cat to do it, I think it's perfectly acceptable, because he's such a loud and brash character.
Yeah. And I think that Rimmer would be a bit weird as well, because Rimmer, like the thing on his book, you expect him to look beyond the camera. You expect him to be like I'm the one to look at kind of thing. I'm the admiral. I want to be the admiral. I want to be looked at rather than you look at him look at you. And so there's that wall there as well. And as you say, the Cat is it's probably a good one. But it is interesting how they kind of use that, and do you use that through the seasons? I mean, he does it early in season 1, and this is the first time we see it here. It'd be interesting to see if it happens in season 3, just to see if it's like a recurring trope, because there's ones I do remember, but I don't know if it's something that they do a lot of.
Where does he do it in season 1?
He does it when he sees Lister on the floor for food, as food. You know, he says,
right, yes.
That's right.
I think it's in that episode. I think it kind of looks, and it's not there. He said, what did he say? It's the one where I actually see Craig Charles laughing on the floor. But and he says something like, "I don't know what it is," but he kind of looks at the camera while he says it. So he's done it in season 1. He's done it in season 2 now. So it'd be interesting to see what happens. The
thing about
3.
Lister being on the floor and laughing is that's why there aren't many smeg-ups of the first 2 series, because they fucking left him in.
Yeah. We haven't got enough tape. That's just true. Keep going. Just keep going.
Do we think this is the first time we hear Arnold Judas Rimmer?
I put that in my notes. I think it is. I think it's just such a clever little gag. Such a horrible little name for him to be given. Yeah, it's really good. I think, we knew he was Arnold J, but I think this is the first time we knew about Judas.
Yeah, potentially. I think I can't think of any other time that it's been mentioned. And the other thing I've got in my notes as well is that the huge black furry spider, which seems to be a recurring fear of one of the writers.
Yeah, because
that happens again in a later season as well.
Yeah, it does.
Which is a lot funnier, by the way. But it's still good here. But I think the fact that it's Crichton's hand is a different reason for it being funny. But that's the second time that's been put in.
I think obviously you're always going to get writers putting in an element of themselves. I think you've probably put your finger on something there, though, that one of them probably doesn't like spiders. I think you're right.
Or one of the cast, because they've talked about it before, where it's, Doug Naylor said he's always asking the cast, what can you do? Can you juggle? Can you do this? Can you do that? What is there that you don't like? And he ends up putting it into the script. So when the cat juggles potatoes in series 1, I can imagine that wouldn't have gone in if Danny John Jules couldn't juggle and things like that. So I can imagine because I think the whole thing about it's in a later series, but Lister's tooth cap is a real story that Craig Charles did, where he puts it back in with wood glue or super glue or something like that, because he didn't want to go to the dentist, and that made a whole point of an episode.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, people do work off that, don't they? Real life examples of stuff that you would put into a show or into your writing. A lot of the time are autobiographical, but the fact they're asking cast members and crew and the like, just to inform the story is interesting in itself. It's interesting as well that as we get to the end of this Better Than Life story, that the cuts get quicker and we seem to get some propulsion in the way that the information is told to us. So, and it works from a game point of view as well. I think they do this a lot they do it in season 8 with removing Rimmer's name, for example. But Rimmer, when we get to the bit with the wife and the kids and they're running around, and you can clearly see it day and night that it's been filmed at different times, because you've got bright blue skies, overcast skies, and you flick back to the scenes where Rimmer's losing it. It's a lot darker and it's overcast and probably raining as well. But the cuts get quicker. So you kind of look at Rimmer, he's clean shaven, then the next cut, literally seconds later, he's unshaven. Then you get to the teeth, then you get such and such. So the actual way that it builds up is really interesting in that way, because it's almost like, we're racing towards the end of Better Than Life, because it's no longer Better Than Life. It's actually Lister's Rimmer is bringing everything down. And obviously, the Taxman as well, bringing that in. That it's just bringing it all back to normal.
I think for me, it didn't feel like that at all. I'm afraid, Kurt. It just felt rushed, I think it's to some extent with hindsight because I've read the book, I enjoyed the book, I like the pace and the detail within the book. But because the book very much focused on this episode and expanded on it much more than it did on anything else, with hindsight, this now feels really, really rushed because they had 25 minutes to tell essentially two quite big stories about Red Dwarf. And it did feel like towards the end it was rushed. I'm not very often critical of Red Dwarf. In fact, I make a point of trying to downplay stuff that's criticised by other people. But this really did make me feel like you could have had this as a separate episode. You could have had this as a two-parter. But that probably is all to do with the fact that I read the book.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I'm just thinking from an editing point of view, it's natural an episode would do that it would kind of, you need to speed that up a little bit and push it and tighten the editing to kind of portray that on a visual format. But I get what you're saying.
I think the editing of it and the sort of really rapid development of it sort of shows that Rimmer's mind is now spiraling out of control, which I think a lot of people with depression, can sort of, or things like that, depression and anxiety, it can start from a small thing and then rapidly get worse and worse and worse. And I think that's in a similar way what's happened to Rimmer, in that he's had this small thing happen to him. Maybe not necessarily his dad appearing and telling him he's a total smeghead, but that might have actually worked against him. And then obviously Magruder gets pregnant, and then in the afternoon she has 7 children, which are now like fully grown. And then it just goes from there. Like you see Rimmer's clothes are like deteriorating as he goes on, and then eventually it finally kicks in and goes completely overboard to the point where there's not even really a logistical transition anymore. They just teleport to the beach buried in sand because Rimmer's brain is just like, we're not messing around anymore. Right, you're going to be in the sand with jam on your face covered by killer ants. You know, it's just gone completely out of his control.
Yeah, and they can get away with it because it's set in a video game, and you would have cuts in video games. I get that. Yeah, maybe I'm being unfair, and I think it is all to do with the fact that the book just is wonderful.
I think you're right that it's worth mentioning and worth delving in more because as we said at the top of this episode, it's probably a good way to bookend it. Actually, is that we're talking about the depths of what a book can do, a novel can do, compared to a 26-minute episode of TV. But at the same time, they both can work to a degree. But if you haven't, it's like things like, we go back to this Dan Brown book that I mentioned last season, the Da Vinci Code. The Da Vinci Code in the movie is horrendous, and the book is horrendous anyway. But there's so much more in the book than there is in the film, and the film just leapfrogs like loads of different things that should have kept going, and it's like, whoa, where did that come from? But had I watched the film before the book, I would have been a bit more, well, that was all right. So I can see where you're coming from. Totally.
Also, I think as well, because we know the backstory on this, part of me wonders if there were so many production problems with locations and things like that this is almost the best that they could pull together. Because I've been on stuff before where we've shot a lot of stuff, and at the end of it, it's like, it's going to be put together with chewing gum and hope. You know, it's sort of and part of me wonders if that's the case with this, in that we'd have shot more, but we just couldn't because it's in Rill and it rained all the time, and we couldn't get what we wanted to do done. I mean, they still did a very good job, but it maybe they actually filmed enough stuff where they did do a long progression of Rimmer falling apart. But when you've only got, say, 25 to 30 minutes, and you've got you want to do the ending, and the more resonating stuff in the mail pod and discovering the father's dead, it's probably just it's almost like an extended montage, really, the whole Better Than Life section. And it's probably just I can imagine it's one of those things where Ed Bye might go, I'd have done that differently now. But it could just be that it's the best of what they could do, really.
Right, okay, so the only thing that's left after the breakdown, obviously, you say they go to the beach, and I love the little touch with having Holly having the jam on him.
I love that as well. That's in my notes too.
Yeah. But they actually took him down, which I find is amazing that they've took him down too real, and he just basically ends up still on screen. Yeah, which they didn't really need to do, but he basically did all his work from the back of a van, which I thought was interesting.
That's true. They just needed to bury the screen, didn't they? You could have done it in a studio.
There's a lovely bit of an outtake where Norman Lovett's talking to like his makeup thing and sort of complaining about something, and the other three are there going, "When you're ready, Norm, anytime now. Come on, Norm." You know, just for God's sake, can't have Norman uncomfortable while they're buried in sand.
And then we come out of that, and you get the trope. It's like typical sci-fi trope of not being actually back in reality yet, that it's actually still the game, and we get the big hammer, and that smashes down, and it says game over, which is another, obviously, end of credit scene, similar to like Garbage Pod. It finishes with a game over screen. And that's it. That's the end of the episode. So have you got any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
I did want to mention one thing, because I actually bothered to do a bit of research. I didn't know whether or not peephole bras were a real thing or whether they were created for Red Dwarf. So I looked them up, and obviously they're not for me, but, boys, you like the girls. So, if you ever fancy a peephole bra, you can get one on Amazon.
So that's a pop-up Kama Sutra and a peephole bra. Right, so my Amazon list is going to look rather strange by the time we get to season 12.
Your recommended items are going to be a mess.
Oh, fantastic. Any final thoughts, Carl?
Yeah, I think there was one thing that we sort of missed out on this. It's a small thing, but I think a big thing in the long term is it's the first appearance of Tony Hawk's.
Yes.
As the guide. Basically doing what he was doing for his warm-up, but he's the guy. He's got some fantastic costumes in this, where he's got the banana bomb cocktail, and he's got the jodhpurs on. He just cuts such an interesting figure on the beach, and I just love his delivery of your caviar vindaloo. the reveal of it as he does it, and was it number 57 Dom Perignon in a pint mug, and I mean, he gets classed as like the fifth dwarfer, doesn't he, or the sixth dwarfer, as the years go on, and he does appear a few more times, most notably as Caligula when they go to Waxworld. But I thought it was quite worth noticing that this is his first on-screen appearance, and how good he is at playing these characters, definitely. And he's got such a great voice.
So much fun. So much fun playing that part.
Yeah, it's one of those things of it's a small part, but you know that you can make the most of it.
Yeah.
And he's really done that, but just by having silly outfits and things like that. I also like the fact at the end when it's revealed that they're still in the game is a bit of a thing which gets carried over in the novels, in that they don't know if they've left or not.
Mm.
Oh yeah, I do have recollection of that actually. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm definitely going to have to read these books. It's been so long.
Yeah, there's I'm sure there's a conspiracy theory out there that they've been in the game the whole time and that they're still on Red Dwarf somewhere, but I like that. But I'm looking forward to listening to the books again. I like the audiobooks purely because Chris Barry's performance in them. He does all the voices as well, which is really good. And in the one that Craig Charles reads, Craig Charles does all the voices as well, and he's remarkably good at copying everybody else. But I'm really looking forward to re-going through the books again as well.
Right, okay, so that brings this episode down to a close. Next week we're going to be talking about Thanks for the Memory. But before that, Mark, where can people find you online?
Well, if you want me, my Twitter is at MarkAdamsHC. That is my personal one, where I mostly talk about my my job, really, and scouting. But you can still find me, Mark Adams HC. My 3 podcasts on the We Made This Podcast network are Right in the Childhood, which is me and my friend Fraser, where there's a big age difference between us and our friendship. So we're looking at alternative months, kids programs from my childhood and kids programs from his childhood, mine being the 80s and 90s and his being the 90s and noughties. And we kind of talk about whether or not they are as good as we thought they were. And in a lot of cases, for the opposite person, they're watching it for the first time. The other podcast I do is at Pull or Pass on Twitter. Pull or Pass, the radio show on Fab Radio International, is made into a podcast on We Made This, which is basically a weekly geeky comic book show with me and my friend Zach. And the last one that I do is Life's Milestones, which is fortnightly on a Monday, and that is my celebrant podcast based on my job, where I talk to a different guest each time about naming ceremonies, weddings and funerals, and also birth, relationships and death.
Excellent stuff. Carl, where can people find you online?
You can find me on my own podcast here on the We Made This network, which is Cerebral Jukebox, where I interview a guest each time about a song they got stuck in their head and then offer to take it away from their memory, or they can keep it for the rest of time. You can also find that on Twitter at Cerebral Jukebox. Or if you want to keep up with any of the things I'm up to, I've got an All My Links page, allmylinks.com/Mr. Carl, and that's MISTER, and there's pretty much everything I'm up to on there as well.
Excellent. Well, you can find me on Twitter at rmuldrake. That's RMULDRAKE. You can also find me on Second Life as Muldrake Noel, which will probably be long and wasted at that point. I'll be on the beach somewhere, I think. I'll
be performing in a club on Second Life from Tuesdays to Wednesdays.
Exactly. Making some simoleons. And the Xcast, which is an X-Files podcast, the X_cast. And The Time Is Now, which is a Millennium podcast, which is at The Time Is Now pod. And I'm seriously considering getting an All My Links website account as well. Just to say,
idea.
Just go there.
Very handy.
I'm getting too many. But thank you very much. As I say, next week is going to be Thanks for the Memories. Carl, thank you very much for coming on for these 2 episodes.
Thank you very much for having me.
Break. Obviously, you were on the specials as well. So thank you for doing them. And we'll speak to you soon. But Mark will be back next week, and we will see you then. So until next time.
Elsewhere on We Made This. Cinemortuary podcast.
Right, Rob, just to laser align and realign the topic of discussion.
Yes.
Would you like to take a dive straight in to the X-Files movie for me, please?
Yes, I would. We open on Gillian Anderson in her lingerie. No, sorry, that's the fan fiction one, isn't it, that people keep talking about?
That you wrote, yeah.
That I did not write, and I will sue you, sir. Right, yes, Silence of the Lambs. Directed by Jonathan Demme, 1991.
Pretty Fly, a 90s nostalgia podcast.
I think it says a lot about our humanity if we go down that road with Hannibal Lecter, and if we kind of, like right at the end of Silence of the Lambs, he's going to have an old friend for dinner. And... which is a great line, by the way.
Tremendous line.
It's a movie full of great lines.
And an old friend for dinner.
But you're kind of happy for him, aren't you? Like I am.
A little bit. I think it's important to remember that even someone who's a psychopath who doesn't have, or a character that's a psychopath that doesn't have that normal range of human emotions, they are human.
Observing the Pattern, a Fringe podcast.
Why is Nina so invested in getting Tyler back? Because, she even offers to put up the money. Like, Massive Dynamics will cover the ransom. So, she's heavily invested. And then, him basically saying, yeah, I took work home with me. And so it kind of, something doesn't add up in that area.
Nina's a very intriguing character because... at least up until this point, and probably well into season 2, you were never sure of of her allegiances.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at We Made This Pod.